This is Tony Arricchetti. Here's some thoughts about typical learner and SP responses to debriefing. I wanted to address some issues that came up recently on the discussion board regarding the use of iMessages and implementing the ORID framework. And a question that came up several times was how to deal with an unreceptive or even a hostile learner. And I answered this by saying that I thought it might be helpful to understand in advance what are typical learner types that show up in debriefing. And so what I'm putting out here is a list of 12 possible learner responses and 12 standardized patient responses to the debriefing process. And the CRM molecule includes curiosity, advocacy or persuasion, and inquiry. And they mentioned the importance of understanding the learner frames. And I think when it comes to understanding the debriefing process and how this works as a dynamic, it's also important to understand the standardized patient frames and how it intersects with the learner frames and creates a unique type of debriefing encounter. And some of the things to pay attention to on both sides include the different roles that the learner and SPs have, their differing educational experiences, their different perceptions, their different ways of processing information, as I'm mentioning in the Myers-Briggs discussion, their differing experience, the context of debriefing, whether it's done voluntarily, for example, or under duress, and also the emotions that both the learner and the SP might be feeling. So it's possible that you can get a really experienced learner and a very inexperienced debriefer, and so that creates a particular dynamic that we want to pay attention to. But here's some thoughts about the different types of learners that come up. I'm not necessarily going to go into how to deal with them. That's a separate issue, but here's some thoughts about the what you might find. The first one is, in terms of learners, is the self-praiser. The highly confident, I did great learner has either the inability, perhaps the unwillingness to self-critique, and you might look for, in terms of their behaviors, direct eye contact when speaking, they speak clearly and confidently, sitting back, being overly relaxed, and they're pretty sure they're great. And on the opposite extreme are learners that are extremely self-critical. They might actually be very good, but they have low confidence, self-effacing, they believe and or say that nothing went well. They might have the inability to really identify what went well, but they can certainly point out what didn't go well, which you may or may not agree with. So you might look for hunch position, in and out of eye contact, leg shaking, whatever are the hallmarks of anxiety. The punter, another example of a non-reflective learner who just wants feedback and puts all questions back to the SP. For example, if the SP asks him or her to tell me what you think about what you just did, they may say, well, you tell me what you think. That's why I'm here. I'm not sure. And so they are sometimes difficult to nail down and get them to start by self-assessing. The agreeable types, the types that will agree with anything that you say, and they're eager for information and will probably eagerly apply anything that is said during debriefing to the next simulation encounter. And they sit on the edge of their seat, lean in, make direct eye contact, and are very eagerly following everything that you say, and they make the debriefer feel great because they're really following everything and are, again, extremely agreeable about everything. The introverted, shy learner is difficult to draw out during this process. They may actually be good during the encounter, but they are quiet and reserved and may show little or no eye contact, low talker, weak handshake, slouching position with head down, It's just a personality type that, again, is a challenge to draw them out. And if the SP debriefer, him or herself, is introverted, then it may not go quite so well. The defensive or hostile learner is one that comes up sometimes, and this is one that feels easily criticized or doesn't like critique, doesn't like to be critiqued or to be given feedback. Perhaps doesn't like or even believe in the debriefing in the debriefing process or in simulation, and especially when there's a power differential between him or her and the SP, there could be problems, and they sometimes seat back, keep a distance, arms crossed, interrupts or talks over to the SP, and are sometimes really intimidating to deal with. The checklist obsessed are those that are only interested in discussing their scores and not interested in discussing their performance. And there's a difference. They will sometimes simply want to know what the bottom line is. Did I pass or not? The fidgeter has a lot of annoying, distracting behaviors. Pen clicking, scratching, restless leg syndrome, touching their hair, little if any eye contact, and this may or may not be evident even during the encounter itself. So it might be something to address during debriefing. What is the nature of the fidgeting? I wonder what's going on. This is what I see you doing. Tell me about this. The language challenged. Now, you may encounter someone who speaks English as a second or a third language, and if debriefing is the art of conversation, they may have difficulty engaging in such a conversation. And what we sometimes have found is that such people sometimes will do a lot of nodding and a lot of smiling, but will not really be following you. So that's an issue. Is determining whether or not they really understand what you're saying. The ultra-concrete thinker is someone who does not buy into simulation. It does not have the ability to suspend disbelief regardless of its authenticity, and have difficulty engaging in debriefing because their response is, well, none of this is really real, so I'm not sure why we're even here. The unaware or uninformed learner claims that they had no idea what to do. They seem to not have a clue, and it's one thing if it happens once, but it happens over and over again, I probably would be concerned. No one told me I had to do this or that. And so they don't take responsibility for the process of learning. And then maybe the most difficult learner to debrief is the highly competent learner. Highly skilled in communication, relaxed, poised, professional, well-paced speech, appropriately confident, professionally dressed. They go through the encounter with little or no issues to be addressed, few concerns on the part of the SP. And I find, though, that the really competent learners are frequently the ones that will raise the issues because they are really dedicated to their own learning. And so if we ask them what they would like to discuss, frequently they will come forward with some of their ideas. Now, in terms of standardized patients, the complementer, regardless of any obvious issues to discuss, the SP is very complimentary of the encounter and not specific. They'll say things like that went really well, you did really great. The teacher, the one who is not there to debrief but is there to teach or to tell the learner what he or she should be doing without exploring properly with the learner why they did what they did, for example. And they frequently have an agenda which they are more than willing to share, and sometimes they will say, I need to have all my learners know whatever it is, X, Y, or Z, and so they need to be dissuaded from that position. The nurturer is uncomfortable with exploring what's concerning and will follow up anything remotely negative with a compliment. And they want to reassure the learner that everything is okay, even if it wasn't very okay. And they may say things like, for example, try to make more eye contact, but overall things really went well. The SP who is triggered by the learner quirks or habits that annoy or distract them, and they may monopolize the debriefing time by a focus on the trivial and not on the important. So, for example, they may tell the learner why he or she shouldn't say okay after each patient response, or they might be the types that are counting up every time the learner says and for them this becomes the chief focus. SPs who are biased. Now everybody is biased, but sometimes biases get in the way of them really appropriately dealing with learners. So for example, if someone shows up who's very attractive, it might be distractingly so that SPs can't really focus on what it is that they need to focus on and use proper judgment. They give elaborate praise while ignoring obvious performance issues. The hesitator has a difficult time articulating what they want to say to the learner. Long pauses between words and sentences. They may know what they want to talk about, they just can't get it out for some reason. And it may be a single incident, or it may be characteristic of the SP. Another variation of the punter is a learner, for example, rather an SP who doesn't answer the learner's questions, but instead hits the ball back to the learner by saying something like, well, what do you think? Or tell me more about that, or well, how do you think you did? And sometimes they avoid learners' direct questions, and it becomes more like a ping pong match. The interrupter is one who is not fully listening to the learner's responses. They may be extremely energetic and enthusiastic, but they can't wait to speak or get their next point across, and sometimes will cut off the learner's sentences. And interesting, like any one of these, but sometimes maybe what they want to discuss is how the learner, him or herself, interrupted them, and so they will sometimes demonstrate some of the same issues. SPs can be checklist obsessed as well, and even when they're told not to pay attention to, for example, the content of the questions or the physical examination, they're anxious to tell the learner, for example, you forgot to ask me about my family history, or you should have checked my heart, even though they're directly told not to do that. Like the learner, the SPs can fidget around, be distracting, swivel around in their chair, talk excessively with their hands, touch their hair, their face, etc., and in general being an annoyance to the learner. The undecider is an SP who has a difficult time focusing on areas to explore with the learner. They may have a list of things that they want to explore but can't prioritize it, and or they're unsure what to debrief or how to show empathic inquiry to explore the learner's choices or decisions. And finally, the angry or hostile SP who is inappropriately harsh or punitive, a non-empathic SP who complains that the learner is non-empathic. So I'm continually fascinated by how sometimes what bugs us is what we end up doing ourselves with the learners, and by projecting onto the learner our own issues. Now, I just gave a list of 12 SP types. Didn't really mention those that really do this well, but these are areas that could intersect with learner types and create interesting dynamics to discuss with them if you're training the SPs. And with that, I wanted to thank you.